Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. We have a special treat for you today. Sara Bareilles is in the back room. And we shall chat with Sara in just a second. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or a post on our social media, and we'll read a few next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe and to be notified every time we post a new episode. Anyway, Sara Bareilles, she's an award-winning singer-songwriter, actor, producer, activist, and New York Times best-selling author whose accolades to date include 2 Grammy Awards, 3 Tony Award nominations, and 3 Primetime Emmy Award nominations. As a recording artist and songwriter, she has sold more than 3 million albums and 15 million singles in the U.S., and her songs have been streamed more than 3.5 billion times worldwide. On Broadway, she composed music and lyrics for Waitress, stepping into the lead role both on Broadway and in London's West End. Other musical theater credits include her Tony-nominated performance as the baker's wife in Stephen Sondheim and James Lapine's Into the Woods, a song on the Tony Award-nominated score for SpongeBob SquarePants, and an Emmy Award-nominated appearance as Mary Magdalene in NBC's Jesus Christ Superstar Live. She plays Dawn Solano on the Emmy-nominated musical comedy series Girls 5 Eva, the 3rd season of which is streaming now on Netflix. And she is currently at work on a musical theater adaptation of Meg Wolitzer's best-selling novel, The Interestings, alongside author Sarah Ruhl. Sara, welcome into the back room.
Hello.
So nice
to be here.
So nice to have you here. So before we get into later days, Sara, let's peel the onion back a little and talk about early, young, maybe even single digits, Sara. Tell me about your childhood and family and, you know, all that good stuff.
You sound like my therapist.
Yeah.
Tell me about my...
I've been told that before, except I don't charge enough.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Oh, gosh. I grew up in Eureka, California, which is a really small coastal rural community. It's like the heart of the redwood, the old growth redwood forests up there. So heart of Humboldt County. Mm-hmm. I always have such fond memories of growing up because I grew up on like 5 acres of redwood forest, and my cousins lived up the road. So I spent most of my life as a kid outside with the animals in the fields, running in the trees, making forts, making little videos, just like all kinds of stuff, but everything happened outside. And I really think it just built in this fascination and connection to nature, mm-hmm. and also to old-fashioned creativity, dreaming, a big imagination, dreaming up big scenarios and full-scale adventures, time travel and singing to audiences that weren't there. And it was just, I had a big imagination as a kid, and it really fed my ambition and my interest in creativity, mm-hmm. as a path forward. Then I went to UCLA when I was 18, and I lived in LA for like 15 years. And it was during my time, I started writing music really young, but was very private about it. Didn't have the confidence to share any of my personal writing.
When you first got bit by the music bug, how old were you? Like, when did you start singing? When did you start playing the piano?
Like 5, 6, 7, uh-huh. Very, very young.
Were you that kid who came down the staircase at your parents' parties and just started singing like, people who need people?
Oh, I would have loved it. Give me a spotlight and a cape, and I am there.
So I was just, that leads to my next question, which you may have just answered, which is, what kind of kid were you growing up? Were you shy, confident, precocious?
Yeah, I think honestly all of the above. Mm-hmm. I think I was really shy in certain scenarios. I was really shy around my peers. Mm-hmm. I would say, I had a kind of a confusing experience at school where I went to a really small private Catholic school, and we had a really small class. I want to say it was like maybe 28 people. And so I grew up with the same kids, but I got teased a lot as a kid. And I realized in retrospect, there was this feeling of like a trap door, that like sometimes they were nice to me and then sometimes it would turn on a dime.
Why did they tease you?
I was a chubby little kid, and I I think, there's a certain amount of like, when you have people kind of growing with you, you get anointed a certain way or another, and then you are that person, whether it actually is reflected in reality or not. And I think I got teased and told I was fat and told I was, ugly and all the stuff, a lot of stuff that really scars you, obviously. But again, in retrospect, I look at that and I think it's part of why I became a writer, is because I had to go somewhere with it's a part of what bred my my sense of being an observationalist. Like it was too scary to be out amongst my peers, but I was really watching everything and certainly feeling self-conscious, so that I would put that somewhere. But I was very bold around my parents' friends. I loved people listening to me sing. I wanted to be at the parties. I wanted to be, like I had this kind of dichotomy within me.
And at what age, I mean, I love asking this question of people who become really successful. You've been singing and music's been a part of your life since you were 5, 6 years old. But was there an age where you sort of stopped and went, damn, I'm really good? Like this is actually something that could go somewhere.
Oh gosh. I mean, I think it almost feels like there's a step that happened before any kind of like, can I actually make this? Is this feasible? Where I made the decision that it was like, I'm not pursuing this as a hobby. I'm pursuing this because like my soul is telling me I need to make music. And that happened when I was 21, when I was living in Italy on my, I did a year abroad. I majored in communications. I got a minor in Italian at UCLA. And so I was studying Italian language all through college, and I did a year abroad in Bologna, Italy. And I had a little bit of a nervous breakdown over there and just like existential crisis. What is life? The world is so much bigger than I anticipated. And I didn't just enjoy making music over there. I actually realized I need to do this. I need to do this to be okay. It's part of my coping mechanism of just being a person. So that feels like the more sort of important revelation. But there was a time in my mid-20s where I was making enough money from playing music where I got to quit my waitressing job, and that felt like I was like, there's something here might even be sustainable. So I mean, you don't know though. It can always turn back the other way. I still think that. I'm like, at any point, this can all go away. We just don't know.
You're suffering from imposter syndrome still?
100%. Do you know anyone who doesn't?
No. Insecurity is my middle name. And so there's, in my deep dive, I found out that you used to play at one of my favorite places in the world, at Genghis Cohen, in that little room. And I was talking to Sophie yesterday, and we were trying to figure out the timing, because right when she was born and like a year and a half later, Adrian was very good friends with Paul Gordon. I don't know if you know him. He's a big music LA guy, composer. He composed Jane Eyre, the Broadway musical.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
And we used to go to Genghis with him all the time. Sophie would climb all over the table, and then we would always stick our heads in that room.
Yeah.
But that's like the cool place to play in LA when you're first coming up, right?
Oh, it was the best. I mean, it was the best. It was Molly Malone's, Genghis Cohen, Hotel Cafe. I mean, I played anywhere and everywhere. I was at the Temple Bar a lot on the West Side. If you could get, that was the place in Santa Monica. But yeah, Genghis Cohen, what was so great, it was just a great room. And that part of what was so cool about it was that it was so unusual. It's in this kosher Chinese restaurant. They're like church pews in that little room where the music happens. So it almost feels like this totally separate world. But they always give you a recording or you could pay $50 and get a recording of the show. So I have many.
You ever break them out and listen to them?
I have done. They're a little cringy for me, but I have once in a while just gone back and been like, oh my gosh, it just feels like I'm listening to another person altogether. Like, who is that person?
Well, in many ways, you are a different person, on many
Yeah.
levels. Back then, who were your inspirations when you first started to think about music as a career and looking at people and wanting to emulate certain styles that really resonated with you? Who are those people?
I remember really two artists, I think, because there was the piano singer-songwriter element where Tori Amos and Fiona Apple were two of the people that I really loved. And Fiona in particular, and part of what I was so moved by was her ability, her lyrics were just next level to me. She was just writing about things with such depth and poetry in a way that I almost couldn't wrap my brain around. It just was so profound to me to hear someone use language that way, and it was so clever and so smart. And then as I got moved, high school also was, people like Radiohead. I listened to a ton of Bob Marley. But it was always interesting feeling like I didn't quite see myself in any of these artists. There wasn't somebody that I was like, oh, I want to do that. And I think a lot of artists fall into that, where when you're early in your career, people always ask you like, well, who are you like? Who do you sound like? And nobody ever wants to tell you they sound like anybody. Like, I'm completely original.
And nobody ever wants to hear someone say, I don't sound like anybody.
Right, of course, because like how egotistical, like insane.
Right. But it's true.
But it is true. And I think if people get given the opportunity to develop themselves and their artistry, we do find what is unique eventually, But I think everybody starts out, kind of emulating people that they love, because that's just how we learn.
And so back to college now. Obviously, you were performing and waitressing and doing your thing. And is there a moment in your career when you started to get beyond that? Reflecting back now, you say, oh, that was my break. Maybe not the moment where you had like a #1 hit or something like that, but just like that inflection point where the road just took a turn and you really felt things moving differently.
I think one of the things that really changed my trajectory was working with my first manager. And I was introduced to him, Jordan Feldstein, through my friends in Maroon 5. So I met Ryan Dusick, who was the drummer at the time, and became friends with the band when they were still Cars Flowers. And then it was the summer of 2000, maybe 5, when they really broke, but they took me on tour with them. And at that point, I was doing, my own self-made CDs through CD Baby, which meant I sat at my kitchen table and I loaded all those envelopes and I addressed all those envelopes and I took packages to the mail, and I was doing all that myself, and I went on tour with them. And I remember after that, I started working with their manager, and that was a change. And he started bringing me bigger opportunities, and I was doing some, we got a publishing deal. I started doing some showcases for labels, and it started to get real, that it wasn't just, I was still waitressing at the time. In fact, I waitressed even after I got my first big publishing check.
Where did you waitress, by the way, in LA?
I waitressed at the Library Ale House in Santa Monica for a long time, and I loved that job. And then I waitressed at the Lazy Daisy Cafe.
Are they still open?
Library is, yeah. It's changed ownership, but so I can't vouch for the food. But the food used to be incredible.
Do you ever go back? Do you ever go back in and just like throw on an apron?
No, I don't. And I won't. But yeah, it's a good idea.
Everything has its time and place, right?
That's right. That's right.
And then in the early 2000s, you started really making music, and you started to get your first hits. And one of the things I was really surprised, like for example, and I listened to Gravity, which was so early in your career, but I started to hear the singer-songwriter that eventually composed Waitress. Like I hear Everything Changes in that song. And it's easy to see how that young performer eventually grew into this enormous success that you created on Broadway, which we'll get into, but you could see the threads that were there, and the melody, and do you see it that way?
Interesting. Oh yeah. I mean, in fact, I quoted Gravity explicitly in Everything Changes.
Oh.
And I sort of did that, the score of Waitress felt like, it was stitched together with my previous body of work in a really intimate way. Mm-hmm. And I think some of that was like, I'm not sure I knew another approach. And I think there was another piece of that just it was my first time writing for characters outside myself. So I think in some way it was a way to keep it all really familiar and really close to me. Mm-hmm.
Love Song is another very Waitressy song.
Totally. Yeah. I always joke about this with Nadia DiGianardo, our MD, our musical director for Waitress. I was like, I know like 5 ways to play the piano, and they're all in Waitress, and this is like, that's all I've got. So
when you find something that works, right, you stick with it.
It ain't broke. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. And then in 2013, Brave came out, and that was a monster hit. Was that a moment where, I mean, obviously you said before you still have a little imposter syndrome and the insecurities never go away, but was that a moment where it was like, wow, this is it. I'm in. There's no turning back.
It's a really funny experience of that song because it's a little embarrassing to admit, but I had a moment with myself beforehand where like I knew that song was special, partially because of my collaboration with Jack Antonoff, who wrote the song with me. And there was just something about the excitement of building something with Jack that made it feel like it was bigger than just me, which I think is that's the best version of collaboration that can exist. Mm-hmm. But when the song came out, I have a journal entry that is it's so deeply cringy. It was just like, get ready, Sarah. This is going to change. Like you're on a rocket ship now. Like this is going to be the song of the century. And I just like really drank the Kool-Aid on myself. And then the song came out and nothing happened for a long time. And then what was so interesting and what I love about the way the universe works and my belief in that we are just every right thing in its right place, is that what happened with that song is that it got sort of adopted by a children's cancer ward at a children's hospital. And they made a music video. And they had these beautiful kids in superhero capes and the nurses singing along. And that little music video got picked up by CNN and local news networks. And then it was on CNN. And then I did an interview with these nurses. But that was the story of the song. It wasn't that it took over the radio waves but it was this organic, that the deeper message of the song that was really written as a love letter to a friend of mine that was struggling with coming out. And that the song like stayed in alignment with the deeper message. And I had never even thought about it as being, confronting an illness or being a child and wanting to sing along with something. That song was such a teacher to me. And I wouldn't have it any other way. But, oh my God, my ego was just on fuego when we were starting.
So when you look,
get ready.
When you look back now on like that journal entry, do you look at it fondly and go, oh, that was a sweet, cute kid who was just starting out? Or are you just like, oh my God, like,
I mean, I wasn't that young. It was not like I was such a young kid when that was happening. I think it's interesting. I don't judge it. I just feel like, oh man, once again, I get taught this lesson of surrender with a capital S. It's not what you can control is making things you love and care about and believe in and stand behind. Mm-hmm. And what is beyond that is literally out of your hands. And sometimes the things you care the most about don't end up making a big, they don't make a big splash on the global scene. Mm-hmm. It's just, but that's not a reason not to make them.
Right.
I just think like the making is so sacred and the creation is so important. for like the good of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I love getting my ass handed to me. I think that's important to get reminded. It's why I love New York City. You just can't, you cannot have preconceptions about what this place and the people who are inside it, what they're doing. You make a snap judgment on someone on the street corner, and then you see them do something that's just like, oh, teaching moments.
So you have a fan base that not only loves you, but really, 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 really loves you. What is it like to feel that kind of love and have so many millions of people think of you as literally like part of their family, to transcend the normal kind of fandom and end up somewhere where people are just losing their minds over you?
Oh, well, I think that, one of the things that has been a real marker of what I offer as an artist is me trying to show up authentically and with vulnerability, like to be willing to share what is painful and to be willing to share what is ugly or hard, or I'm not trying to pull one over on anybody that any of that stuff doesn't exist in me. So I think the relationship with my fans and the relationship with the people who respond to the music is usually around vulnerability, which I think means it just feels like a very truthful connection. So I love them, and I feel really, I take my role as, I don't know, sort of a steward of experience. I take that really seriously, that helping to translate some of these more painful moments into song or into something that might bring comfort. That's a really important part of what I'm trying to offer as an artist. And
No, I would agree with that, because I think you're a very rootable person. You've talked about insecurities and being teased growing up, and all of those things are not only painful, but they're universal. I mean, people identify with that. And so I think people enjoy seeing not just that authenticity that you talk about, but seeing somebody be able to rise above that, but still deal with the same things they're dealing with. But I'm a big believer in, like, we need to root for our heroes.
I get that.
So let's talk about Waitress. The story started with the film, and the musical is still this worldwide phenomenon, breaking all kinds of records. What do you think it is about that story, these characters, that has resonated so passionately over the years among generations of women and men?
Oh gosh, I think it's so baked in, to be cliche. It's so baked into the source material.
Nicely done.
World. This world and these characters that Adrian created are so rich and so funny and so human. And I just think she did this amazing thing where this like heightened realism, just like everything hovers just above the earth a little bit. And it's it's like almost fantasy, but it's not. And it's just a really sweet spot, I think, tonally and in terms of storytelling. And I always talk about how radical it was to put a woman at the center of this story, a woman who doesn't want her child, and to not judge that and to not make that wrong or bad. And then that part of learning to love herself comes through going into these very dark places. It feels so bold and so brave to me. And I mean, you've seen the response to this show. I feel like, what we always tried to do, and I know you know this, that I was always talking to Adrian and always inviting her into the process. But I think, people are just really moved by watching someone choose themselves over abuse, over a painful situation, that just the willingness to stand in the fire is just a remarkable thing to watch. And the fact that she sends that message, with as much humor and levity and joy as comes in that show as well. It's just a really an amazing needle to thread that was in the source material that hopefully we paid homage to and then, built upon. But I felt like it was all there.
And it's like the vulnerability we were talking about before. This story is about a woman, like you say, doesn't want her baby. She's cheating on her husband with her gynecologist. Like you should kind of hate this woman, but you don't.
100%.
You fall in love with her. And I think, the whole thing, I remember talking with Adrian about it, like not every woman when they get pregnant are out dancing in the streets. Women go through a lot emotionally.
Yeah.
And so it's not like all fairy tales and that kind of thing. And so I've always felt that the audiences, especially the women, it resonated with them because I think there's a lot more people out there than not who go through those exact same things, as did Adrian. I mean, she wondered, what is this going to do to my career and my life and my identity as an individual? How does this change me? I've seen so many people get changed by parenthood and not always in a good way. And so I've always felt that's why audiences just loved it despite the crazy plot lines. And, Jenna is an infinitely rootable character, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
I do think it's really, for women in particular who are so used to seeing, the Prince Charming trope, it's really powerful to see her not choose the doctor. Spoiler alert, if any of you have not seen it, she doesn't end up with the doctor. But it's really like this thing that I'm talking about where she chooses herself. It's just it's a beautiful story to tell and to stand with her friends, her sisters. I think for a lot of women, that sisterhood of friendship, the real soulmate love of friendship is something that is not, it doesn't take center stage. We spend a lot of time artistically talking about romantic love, and as well we should. But there is also a very intimate soulmate kind of relationship with friends that I think lives in a really beautiful way in this show.
Mm-hmm. As you know, Broadway musicals open and close all the time, sometimes in the same night. It's a truly daunting task to compose one. How confident and or terrified were you when deciding to take this project?
Zero confidence, 0% confident. In fact, in my first meeting with Diane Paulus, our director, who is a Tony Award-winning director, I had a lot of experience, sat with her and so I said, I have zero confidence that I can do this, but I will try. And let's just make an agreement that if we wander down this road and it's not working, we'll just shake hands and I'll go on my merry way and you can make a great show, But I really loved the challenge of this. And part of me, I think it was that I'm a really stubborn, I always say I'm stubborn as a blood stain. Like I'm really stubborn. And there was a piece of me that was like, I want to chew on this puzzle because I just didn't really know if I knew how to do this. And thankfully, I had incredible collaborators who had a lot more experience than I did and could help sort of shape how this went. But I think I also was a quick study, and it's a form I love, musical theater. It's a form I love and had at least some experience with as a real fan and was in shows as a child and stuff. But I was terrified that it wasn't going to be good enough. But once you're in the process of making something, there's just really no time to sit back and worry about you just are solving problem after problem after problem. And there's something really intoxicating and beautiful about that. And then so incredible and collaborative. We bring all these people together and we're all trying to just solve the same problem. And, some things are swing and a miss, but ultimately it just feels like such a noble pursuit. And then, we were open almost 4 years on Broadway, which is almost unheard of at this point. It's just, I mean, and the industry has changed so much, but that was a tremendous accomplishment. And then to have so many successful tours and running in Montreal right now, the film is, the film was the #2 film in the UK on its release on that first weekend.
The live capture.
The live capture film. And it's just amazing to watch the legacy of this show continue to have a big life.
Well, the musical, I'm no Rodgers or Hammerstein, but I know enough to know that if you
Neither am I.
Well, you're pretty close in my book. But if you're making a musical, the music has to hit it out of the ballpark. And the score, I've told you this many times in the past, the score it's epic. It's unbelievable. She Used to Be Mine in particular, not to take anything away from the other songs, is one of those songs that rarely comes around. It just transcends everything else and has such profound impact on audiences and generations, and covers on American Idol and just everywhere. It's it becomes a part of the audience's DNA in a way. I always think about McCartney's Yesterday and how he came up with the melody in his sleep, if you believe Paul, and I do. And then he slugged Scrambled Eggs as the title. It was a working title, Scrambled Eggs, until he could, he worked on the lyrics. And I say this as a diehard Beatles fan, and I told you before we got on the chat today that I just recently interviewed Pete Best, which is a big throw. But to me, She Used to Be Mine, it's right there with Yesterday. So I want to know how easily, I'm assuming you didn't write it in your sleep, maybe you did, but how difficult was that song to write, and what is your process? Did the lyrics come first? Did the music come first? Was that song different than your writing process for everything else? Yeah.
I mean, it was a little bit like Conjuring. And, I feel like that song just got delivered. And I knew I wanted to write something. I had just watched the movie for the first time. And the scene that I couldn't stop thinking about was where Carrie Russell and Jeremy Sisto are in the kitchen, and she has the oatmeal, and he's found the money, and she's lying to him, and he doesn't know, but he does know. It's this very nuanced, beautiful performances by both of those actors. And it really stuck with me as this moment that could sing after he leaves. And I sat down at the piano, and I mean, the demo of that song is literally the song that it's the song that lives in the show. It came out really quickly. It's the first song that I really wrote for the show, and it felt like it was a portal kind of into the world of Waitress. And I think at the time, I had just moved to New York City. I was trying to rebuild my life. I was taking this big swing. I had left my manager, my band, my relationship of 6 years. I rented my house out thinking I would come to New York for a year. But I arrived and I was at a mattress on the floor, a rental piano in the corner, and was like, I just said yes to writing a musical. Like, what the fuck am I doing? And I think I was writing that song as much for me as I was for Jenna. And I was finding our sort of soul connection from a character standpoint, but also just like, oh, this piece as a whole is going to be an exercise in finding the humanity, the threads of humanity. And here I am, and I feel very close to Jenna in this moment of just like the person I thought I was going to become is nowhere to be found. And what do you do with that? Like, who did I think I was going to be, and why am I not that person? And then, kind of building out from there, these songs for these characters became what I like to refer to as like an exercise in radical empathy. Or it's like finding my way into all of these characters, including Earl. And you have to love all of them. You have to love, everyone is the hero of their own story. So, and I can relate to, Becky making a mistake on purpose because it's giving her something. And I can relate to Dawn sort of hiding in her shell-shaped mind and being afraid to be seen because what if it's painful? And, I was just finding myself in all these characters. And then it became this delicious experiment of like, how far can you go? And turns out pretty far.
Yeah. Well, to sort of circle back to a few things we were talking about before, the success of that show is largely, of course, the music. It's a musical, and your music, your composition, your score it is just epic. And that combined with what we were talking about in terms of your fans and how much they love you, like it just all came together in the most purposeful, right way. You guys really did an amazing job taking the heart, the soul, the DNA of what Waitress was on film and open it up to this whole new world. I was pretty skeptical when I was first told that it's going to be a musical. And
I would be too.
Yeah, and I just started seeing like confetti and all kinds of crazy.
Yeah.
And then they, Barry sent me some music. And this first song I heard was She Used to Be Mine. And it was just like, done.
Oh.
And then my personal favorite story was sitting with Barry and saying, so how's it going with the casting of Jenna? And he said, yeah, well, we're still looking. Got any suggestions? And I said, well, I saw this musical last night, which was pretty amazing. Beautiful. And he goes, not for public consumption, but we just signed her this morning. And I was like, bingo, done. And that's when I knew that this is off and running, because the voice and the music together just, it was going to take the story further. And so after Waitress, you probably could have done anything. I'm sure your offers were all over the place. And you landed with Girls Five Eva. And it's now in its third season, Netflix. Congratulations. What was it that excited you at that time, coming off of this incredible high of Waitress? What made that the next thing for you?
You get a phone call from Tina Fey. You're like, yes, tell me where to show up. I will be there. I was flabbergasted by the offer. I couldn't believe that the alchemy of a project like that, not only was it like one of my heroes attached, but it was written and conceived by Meredith Scardino, who I'm also a huge fan of. And then knowing Renee Elise Goldsberry was attached at the time. We didn't have Paula Pell and Busy Phillips yet, but I love Renee. And then I was like, middle-aged women navigating the music industry with heart and humor, like, yes. And it was a tremendous blessing. That show has been a tremendous blessing. It also, we shot our first season in October of 2020. So it was the height of the pandemic. It was a very, very scary time. I just lost one of my best friends to cancer, and to get to go to work, to get to be in a room with other people was like this unheard of thing. Like you were never in a room with people at that point. We were just all social distancing, and you might see people at the grocery store, but you had masks. So to be maskless with people talking, touching, hugging, it was unbelievably healing, and laughing, and the laughter. And my big, huge takeaway was like, oh my God, I've never felt the lesson more deeply about how not frivolous comedy is. Comedy is so important and so healing and so helpful.
Sure is.
And that was just an amazing experience, and so much growth. It was, again, doing something brand new that I didn't know how to do. And I got to learn so much, and I was really scared and really kind of intimidated. And I, over the last 10 years of my life, that's my sweet spot. I like to be in places where I can tell I'm kind of at my edge, and because I like to grow into the new space. So,
and it seems like
really fun.
It seems like your latter work, let's say the last 5 to 10 years, what you've been doing, working on projects that are female-centric and demonstrate female empowerment and have a message beyond just entertainment. It seems like that's become very important to you.
Oh, yeah, big time. I think it's always been something that I sort of took for granted, and I just now get to really embrace the fact that it can be so intentional about even who do you hire, who do you work with, are you bringing women into the room to have a seat at the table and be a part of the creative process. It's really exciting because I, especially coming up in the music industry, is, more often than not, I was the only woman in the room, and being told that I didn't know what I was talking about. So I really love being in those spaces. And then, hopefully we always said this about the Waitress creative team, like, we're really looking forward to the time where this is not a big deal. It's just, we happen to be women, but how about we just made a musical? We made a musical, and there's the musical, and you love the musical. But it's, we're changing. The industries they're still shifting.
Mm-hmm. And so in our last minute or two, I want to talk about what's next. You got some exciting stuff coming up. You're doing orchestral performances in August and September. The first is at the Hollywood Bowl, and then you're doing the Kennedy Center in Washington. And then you're also working on a new musical based on the novel The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer.
Yes. These have been long time dreams to get to a place where I felt where I could do an orchestra show. I have my fantasy is to get to, really spend some time in that space. And this will be our first swing at this. So the opportunity came up from the Hollywood Bowl, and in a perfect world, I would have a new record, or I would be doing something, but I talked with my team, and I was like, I just don't want to miss this opportunity. I feel so lucky to be invited into this space. Like, let's go, let's do it. And then the Kennedy Center shows came up after that, and it was like, this feels perfect for this year. I'm not doing a lot of shows, so let's just do a few and make them totally a singularity in terms of what I've done in the past. So it will be a little bit of a mix of, I'm doing some musical theater songs, I'm doing lots of songs from my repertoire, doing a cover song, just to kind of crossing the span of what I've done before, but also bridging the space between musical theater and the pop space and orchestra, and trying to make it feel as intimate as possible. So that's the big goal for these shows. And I will be debuting one of the new songs from the Interesting score. I'm gonna similarly, She Used to Be Mine was the first song I wrote for Waitress, and there's a song called Enough that is the first song I wrote for the Interestings that sort of feels thematically really rooted at the center of the questions that this piece is kind of digging at. It's an incredible novel about these kids who meet at a summer arts camp in upstate New York. And
in the 70s, right?
Yeah. And it follows, this novel spans about 30 years, and it follows them through their lives and their friendship and their marriages and death and life and kids and the choices we make. And again, I think this theme about like the person you are versus the person you thought you would become, I find that to be almost infinitely fascinating. That theme runs really strong in this show, and this song is about what is enough and when is it enough. Like it's you keep moving, it changes shape once you get near it. Nothing is ever enough, and I think that's definitely something I tussle with, in my life.
Well, good luck with that. That has written all over it. My last question, and I know I chose the right question based on what you said before about comedy. This is like a window into the soul question, and music, as you obviously know, is a great window into the soul. But since you're such an amazing musician, I'm going to go a little differently and ask you to name your top 5 comedians of all time.
Ooh, top 5 comedians: Betty White, Carol Burnett. Let's see, Richard Pryor.
Oh, the best.
Eddie Murphy, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. I have to put them right there. They're right there.
Excellent. Sarah, this was really fun. Thank you so much for doing it, and good luck with everything. Great projects.
Thanks, Andy. Great to see you. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Okay, bye.
This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.